Well, here we are, together again at the beginning of another week, at the very end of January. I hope you had a good weekend and are revved up, psyched up to take on another week of life, another day. Hey, let's just stay right here in this moment to practice mindfulness and be thankful, at least from my point of view, for you, for joining me, for being a part of this community and this daily podcast, as we learn what the hell is happening in our world, in our country, in our communities, in ourselves each and every day. Thank you very much for your support. Joining me today, I've got the great Maura Quint, Maura Mondays, and later on today, I'll be dropping my conversation with JoJo from Jers, Joanne Carducci. Look out for that. She was played by Dakota Johnson on a sketch on Saturday Night Live last night, and she's a good friend of mine, and I had a great conversation with her. Can't wait to share that one with you as well. If you want to skip the news, my conversation with Maura Quint begins at about 19 minutes in. But you don't want to skip the news because nobody does a better recap than we do here at Stand Up with Pete Dominic, right here in the solar-powered shed just north of New York City. First, a bunch of headlines, then audio, every day, Monday through Friday, all in and around 20 minutes, and then to the interview. That's the format. Let's get it. Let's get it. Who the hell am I? All right, here's what I got for you from the weekend as I see it. Probably one of the biggest stories and most important stories is that 3 United States troops were killed in a drone attack in Jordan on the border of Syria. More than 30 were injured. A drone came in and somehow, I'm not exactly sure, launched a missile into this U.S. outpost. First time U.S. troops have been killed by enemy fire in the Middle East since the beginning of the Gaza war. The President of the United States says, "We shall respond," and Republicans like Lindsey Graham and Senator Jon Carroll and others are demanding that Biden retaliate by attacking Iran directly, because these are apparently Iranian-supported separatists in this attack. But a lot of Republicans are already calling for a war in Iran, an invasion, a bombing of Tehran is what they are asking for. And Tucker Carlson called them lunatics. He seems to be against all the wars, which is interesting, except the war on democracy. Donald Trump, of course, blamed it, and others have blamed it on Biden's weakness and all the typical bullshit. It's a lot more complicated than that, but the idea that there is this outpost where there's over 300 troops and a drone successfully attacked and killed and injured several of them should be retaliated with a war in another country is exactly how we get into wars that we have never been able to win. But Lindsey Graham calling for it, well, that means never do it, because he's always wrong about everything, because he only cares about himself, like so many others. That's the big story, top story, I think, from yesterday. We'll obviously have to pay close attention to what happens there now. I'll have some audio for you on that one, but let's move on to the rest of the headlines I've got for you, including this crazy story about Vince McMahon, who is now being accused of sex trafficking and sexual assault, and he did some really terrible, creepy, horrible things to a woman. We talked about it at the Hangout on Thursday night. I'm not going to describe it, but I highly recommend you read about Vince McMahon. It's good to see a guy who's done so many terrible things go down like that. We'll see what happens with him, but he had to resign from the WWE, which he created. I'm sure it's all just a performance resignation, and he's still in charge, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with that legal matter. The Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who is a Christian nationalist person, is trying to kill a bipartisan border security bill, saying the deal that senators, Republican and Democratic senators, are negotiating would most likely be dead on arrival if it got to the House. So that is another major story because, of course, Republicans are screaming about the border every day, and then when there's a deal, they don't want it because Donald Trump doesn't want it, because what they want is the issue and not a solution. Moving on, inflation continued to cool last month, according to the Federal Reserve's preferred measures. Elon Musk dismantled Twitter's system for flagging false claims about voting. Now he's spreading election misinformation. He's a madman and a cartoon villain, and he's on the march. Crazy. Negotiators now closing in on a deal in the Middle East, which Israel would suspend fighting in Gaza for about 2 months in exchange for the release of more than 100 hostages. Back here at home, a coalition of black faith leaders are partly spurred by their own parishioners pressing the Biden administration to push for a ceasefire in Gaza, and they aren't alone. And on Germany's Holocaust Memorial Day, tens of thousands demonstrated in support of democracy and against the rise of the far-right political party for the second week in a row. And the Super Bowl has been decided, and so if you're from Kansas City, you're happy again. There have been in like 4 of the last 5 Super Bowls, and there's this amazing storyline that either you love or hate about the most famous woman perhaps in the world, Taylor Swift, dating one of the best players, the tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs, Travis Kelce. And then there's that other storyline because he is a spokesman for vaccines. So the right hates him. A lot of football fans hate him. And the best thing that's happened all year around this was the TikToks where women were saying to their husbands that Taylor Swift put Travis Kelce on the map, even though he's a very well-known, successful, famous football player for a long time, one of the most famous. And so we got to watch a whole lot of men be real angry about being trolled by their wives and girlfriends. And I've just really enjoyed those videos. So it's the Kansas City Chiefs, and they're going to they beat the Baltimore Ravens, and that was an upset. And Detroit Lions lost in a heartbreaker to the San Francisco 49ers. If you are a fan of the 49ers, congrats, but my sympathies are with the Lions and the Lions fans. Amanda Brooks reached out to her last night, and all the rest of you Detroit fans, I am so sorry that Detroit lost. They have never been in a Super Bowl, so we were pretty excited, and now it's not happening. Those are some of the headlines I've got for you. Super Bowl, by the way, February 11th. Chiefs versus 49ers should be exciting if you care about football at all. And those are your headlines for the weekend. I probably should have more, but that's mostly what I found. And I've got a lot of audio because it is Monday, a lot of stuff happening on the Sunday shows and over the weekend. Let's start with President Biden, who was in South Carolina, his second trip to the state this month, just 1 week before the Democratic presidential president. Biden sought to build momentum among black voters in the state that he said saved his campaign in 2020. He also attacked Donald Trump for attacking our veterans while he was president. He's going to hammer him on this, as he should, each and every day. Listen to a little bit of that.
Well, as commander-in-chief, I look at veterans completely differently than Donald Trump. Think about this, especially here in South Carolina, a proud military state. Donald Trump, when he was commander-in-chief, refused to visit a cemetery, U.S. cemetery outside of Paris for fallen American soldiers. And he referred to those heroes, and I quote, as suckers and losers. He actually said that. He said that. How dare he say that? How dare he talk about my son and all of us like that? Look, I call them patriots and heroes. The only loser I see is Donald Trump.
Yes, good stuff. I love it. And President Biden also had this message for black voters in South Carolina.
So I want to start with a very simple message. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you ever doubt that, the power to change America is in your hands. Remember this. You proved it. You're the reason I am president. You're the reason Kamala Harris is historic vice president. And you're the reason Donald Trump is a defeated former president. You're the reason Donald Trump is a loser. And you're the reason we're going to win and beat him again.
There you go. Meanwhile, the disgraced former president was in Las Vegas at one of his weird rallies, and I'm going to play a little bit of him, but trigger alert for anybody like my friend Tina Rose, who cannot even deal with the sound of this horrible rapist's voice. This clip will last about 44 seconds, and it's basically Donald Trump saying he had it even worse than Abraham Lincoln, who was shot in the head.
Somehow, it all works out. Somehow, people say, how do you do it, sir? How do you do it? I get 2 questions. If you had it to do again, would you do it? Because, you know, in history, they say the president that was treated the worst was Abraham Lincoln, but he had the Civil War, you know, so he had a little Civil War going. Abraham Lincoln. And Jackson was treated very badly, and a couple of others were treated. Andrew Jackson, he was treated very badly, and a few others. And I haven't seen the new list, but if I'm not number 1 over Abraham Lincoln, I will be very disappointed because I don't believe any president's ever been.
I mean, what a lunatic. Just an absolute crazy lunatic of a person. And that whole rally in Vegas was absolutely wild. But that's all I'm going to play for you. And you can look into the rest of the crazy shit he said if you'd like to. But I'm moving on to some other wild things that were said. Republicans coming out in full-throated support of him on the Sunday shows, and journalists doing a good job asking each Republican after he has been found guilty of the crimes against Jon Carroll, are they still going to support him? Well, here's Senator James Lankford. He's from Oklahoma, and I guess he's fine. Here he is on CBS with Margaret Brennan.
Hey, before I let you go, I want to get your reaction to the news that he was ordered to pay $83 million to a person that a jury found he defamed after a separate jury found that he had sexually assaulted her. Does it give you any pause about him returning to office?
It doesn't. Obviously, these are...
Now, Senator Lankford says more after it doesn't give me any pause, obviously. And you can hear that. But that's the only thing that matters, is that he said it does not give me any pause. Ugh.
Legal cases. I don't jump in the middle of a legal case. It's been interesting, the number of legal cases that have come up against President Trump and then have failed and have been dropped or have been kicked out of the courts on it. This one's actually went through. He's already said he's going to challenge it. So let the courts actually make their decisions and let the American people make their decisions. We got states like Colorado that are trying to be able to block the people of Colorado from being able to choose who they vote for.
Right.
Let the American people decide this in November.
Well, the Supreme Court might decide on that one. We will have to leave it there for today.
And there you have it. So he doesn't seem to have any principles. But you know who does? Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina. Yeah, he'll probably be appalled by the Jon Carroll settlement, right? Here he is on ABC with Martha Raddatz being asked the same question.
That your candidate, former President Trump, was ordered by a jury to pay $83 million for defaming writer Jon Carroll. He was also found before, as you know, liable for sexual abuse. Does that give you any pause in your support?
You know, myself and all the voters that support Donald Trump supports a return to normalcy as it relates to what affects their kitchen table. The average person in our country, Martha, they're not talking about lawsuits. As a matter of fact, what I have seen, however, is that the perception that the legal system is being weaponized against Donald Trump is actually increasing his poll numbers.
I understand that, but they were jury trials. They were jury trials. They started when Donald Trump was president. That gives you no pause whatsoever.
I don't have the Democrats don't pause when they think about Hunter Biden and the challenges that he brings to his father. The one thing I think the electorate is thinking about most often is how in the world will the next president impact my quality of life? How will America regain its standing in this world? They were better off under Trump, and they're looking for 4 more years of low inflation, low crime, low unemployment, and high enthusiasm for our country. We haven't had that in the last 4 years.
Okay. Wow. That is tough to take. Poor Tim Scott. Just absolute. He will be destroyed by Donald Trump in just a matter of time. He really thinks he might be the vice president. And even if he were the vice president, of course, you might want to look into how his last vice president is doing. They tried to hang him, Tim Scott. All right. Well, this next clip will be less upsetting because it's the silky smooth governor of California, Gavin Newsom, on ABC with Jon Carroll.
Michelle Obama, as I'm sure you saw, said that people should be terrified about what could possibly happen with the outcome of this election. Is she right to be terrified?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all should be. I mean, what more evidence do you need? I mean, here's a guy who lost the election, Trump, and tried to wreck the country. He's lighting democracy on fire. He's making democracy a partisan issue. Never imagined that in my lifetime. So the consequences are profound and pronounced, and that's why I'm down here, because this race is started, and we need to lift up the issues, the successes, this extraordinary successes of the last 3 years, the Biden-Harris administration, and then we drive contrast. It's not even a complicated campaign. We have the receipts. We have the best 3-year record of any modern American presidency, period, full stop. And you look at the issue by issue, they poll overwhelmingly. American people support what Biden has done.
Except for the big thing, approval.
Yeah.
Biden's approval is historically low. Why is that?
Everybody's approval. across the spectrum. You find exceptions to that. Look, it's been hard globally the last 6-7 years. But again, America stands tall with a tentpole of the world economy. No peers economically. Again, a masterclass of delivery. The economy is booming, inflation is cooling, and of course the economic strategies this president's put together were all things Republicans dreamt of, but never delivered. He's delivered.
Obviously, the border is a...
There you go. Well, I guess that clip cut off at the border issue, which is a real issue and an issue that animates voters across the spectrum. So there you have it. Those are your audio clips. I like to end on something funny. And over the weekend, Saturday Night Live was live. And I always love the weekend update with Colin Jost and Michael Che. Let's check in on them and end on a laugh.
The jury in his defamation case has ordered Donald Trump to pay writer E. Jean Carroll $83.3 million. And Trump is a billionaire, so obviously he immediately hit up your grandma for $5. They ordered Trump to pay $83 million. That's how unlikable he is. For perspective, O.J. Simpson only had to pay $33 million for a double murder.
He didn't even do it.
Oh, okay, well... This trial must have driven Trump crazy. The judge kept telling him to shut up. The jury made him pay triple what the victim asked for. Even the courtroom sketch artist made him look like that lady who got her face ripped off by a monkey. The only way this could have gone worse for Trump is if they took away his businesses, which is, of course, what happens in next week's trial.
After Ron DeSantis endorsed Donald Trump, he called DeSantis a really terrific person and promised to stop calling him Ron DeSanctimonious. Well, it's like a wise man once said.
You can be the most worthless Republican in America, but if you kiss the ring, he'll say you're wonderful.
Well, after the New Hampshire primary, Nikki Haley attacked Donald Trump and called out his, quote, senior moments, which made Trump so angry he almost ripped off the safety rails on his toilet.
Haley also called Trump totally unhinged and called for him to take a mental competency test. And here's some footage of Trump trying to buzz in with his answers.
Ding, 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 ding. Pshin, boom.
See, he's fine. Hasn't lost a step. Trump did have a slight stumble this week while talking about banks, and he introduced an interesting new term called debank.
We're also going to place strong protections to stop banks and regulators from trying to debank you.
They want to debank you, and we're going to debank.
I don't know what the hell debank means, but he might have to take de-ambulance to see the doctor.
All right, I don't know what happened to the clip there at the end. It got distorted at the end. I'm not going to fix it. I apologize. I'll give you your money back. I'm so sorry. Thank you for all of those of you who have sent me your money with a subscription on Patreon. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick if you haven't. And join us in Las Vegas, March 22nd and 23rd. Very, very excited. Really looking forward. So many people I know and love are coming. It is going to be the most awesome time. If you're on the fence about it, you should pull the trigger and buy the tickets and come. There is more information in the show notes if you want to buy the tickets, but it's going to be a really fun weekend. It's going to be more than just an all-day Saturday party, but Friday night, Sunday morning, I'll be there from like Wednesday to Monday. So come on out, hang out with us in Las Vegas. But now it's time to get to my guest. All right, well, she's one of our favorites. She joins me often on Mondays. That's why we call them Maura Mondays. She, of course, is the campaign chair at Americans for Tax Fairness. She's the co-founder and executive director of Tax March, taxmarch.org. And she is brilliant on all the social media, where she dominated on Twitter, and now she's mostly posting over on Blue Sky. And if you want a code to be on Blue Sky, just let Maura or I know. Ladies and gentlemen, she is one of the best. She is one of the funniest, smartest. We always love to talk to her. It's time for Maura Quint.
So you don't care about football? You do care. I thought you cared about football. It's the division finals. It's the semifinals before the Super Bowl, and the whole Taylor Swift thing is still going. Are you not into this?
Pete, what would make you happier if I cared about football or didn't care about football?
I think you hate America, and I think that football is.
Of course, I hate America. Yeah, that one's easy. Done.
You didn't even let me finish.
It was such a certainty.
I have a mixed relationship with football, but I think I like now.
You like the concussions, yeah.
The concussions and
you're like traumatic brain injury. Let's do it.
Capitalism, the patriotic porn.
God, yeah.
The camouflage, all of it. The racism, all of this.
Exploitation of youth, sure.
Yeah. But I like it. And I now don't participate as much in it by fast forwarding through all the commercials and even watching I watch a game. I've never let a game affect me emotionally at this point in my age or take up too much of my time. But you don't. But I thought you did. I thought you liked it.
No, I mean, I have been all over. I've been on every part of the football love-hate spectrum. I've explored it thoroughly, and I wound up at just sort of a removed. I'm evolved, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And now I just look down upon everyone, no matter where they are.
I feel that.
And their puny, mortal feelings about football. Yeah.
I feel that. I actually felt like if we were just in the same room, you would have mashed my face. Push me down into the ground.
I think that's accurate, no matter what we're talking about. Yeah,
I saw that coming. I finally saw one coming. You rarely forecast, but I saw it myself. Said it's like she is gonna jump off the top turnbuckle on me right now.
From the ropes. Yeah.
From the ropes. Here comes Maura Quint. Down goes Dominic. Okay, listen. I like to go sometimes. You're always a great interview no matter what. Last time we get real personal. It was really interesting, resonated with a lot of folks that really appreciate it, as I told you. But I also love to just go through your latest posts and allow you to expand on them. Some are funny, some are very important and serious. So are you ready?
Yes, I haven't been funny very much lately, but yes, I'm ready.
Overall, you haven't been funny lately? How do you measure? On social media, you mean, with your posting?
Yeah, I have not been very funny. I've not been entertaining myself, which is really the only reason I post, is to make myself laugh, and I haven't been making myself laugh much.
Oh, okay. Well, I think there's quite a few funny ones. There's some of them are, as
well, I might be a more evolved audience than you. It's all right, though.
Well,
Did you like how I could put us both down at the same time? Because I personally am pretty pleased about that.
That was,
yeah.
That earlier one was more precision, though I saw it coming. This one was more a carpet bombing napalm, a kind of a liquid fire. So here's one. Turmeric is the patron spice of scorned lovers. Thought you'd use me once and forget about me. No, bitch, I'm staying in your life forever. What sparked that?
All the yellow stains all over everything in my household. Mm-hmm. Everything is stained yellow. And I have no idea. If you said, what does basil taste like? I could be like, oh yeah, no, it's a very clear, distinct flavor with a pre-basil, post-basil. I understand entirely the way that this flavoring has changed. Oregano, wow, that's a powerful one. Got it, understood, completely. Cinnamon, all over it. Turmeric, I have no idea. I don't actually know what the flavor of turmeric is. To me, turmeric is just like, wouldn't it be fun if everything was yellow? That's what it is.
This is a funny post. Unionizing my brain and going on strike for better treatment and emotionally safer working conditions. You're very honest about your emotional states and state, and you know how to make the tough stuff funny. It's very funny. I like that. What sparked that?
Self-hatred. Being mean. Actually, no, really. It's that constant thing where everyone's like, be nicer to yourself. And I refuse to. I will not.
Is it true that you said something just before I hit record about you that I didn't know? I thought I'd gotten to know you pretty well. That you walk around singing and rhyming all day.
Literally all the time. All the time. Nonstop. It's all I do. Yeah. And I think that it is the sort of mark of like, how close are you to me? The people who are closest to me are like, yeah, of course, that's Maura. That's all she does. She just is constantly sort of singing to herself and to others and rhyming things just in a ridiculous manner. And then anyone outside of that immediate, like very close sphere is like, she does what? Like, it's a very black and white thing. Either you see it or you don't.
Well, I was having technical issues and getting set up, and you just began to sing, and it was hilarious.
Now you know how much I trust you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
you just got circled in there, Pete. Now
that
you're
feels good. Feels warm.
Stop.
Feels like a nice hug. Okay. Well, how about Speaking of hugs, I don't know. I had no segue.
Is that how you get hugs? Is that your pickup line?
Oh my God, I need a pickup line to get some hugs.
Aww.
What did that mean? I want to be touched. Okay, by anything, an animal. My dog keeps my dog is neglecting me. She is mad at me because I haven't been walking her, and
no, you're supposed to do that.
Yeah.
You're definitely supposed to walk dogs. I'm pretty sure.
I can't believe I just admitted that. Somebody else has been walking her. No one walked her. I'm kidding. I really wanted to get your reaction. Everybody's obviously talking about the big verdict from last week. This is pretty... I feel like this is like a lot of justice in a way. And E. Jean Carroll getting this $83 million. And I've heard a lot of legal analysts say she's going to get it. Her lawyer says she's going to get it. Her lawyer's going to get paid out. So Robbie Kaplan, she's amazing. I don't mean to take anything away from her. She deserves Trump's money. But what are your thoughts on this? All of it, the verdict, the jury. It was 7 white men, by the way, and in New York.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. That was my first question too. I was like, oh, well, she's never going to see a dime of it. But yeah, a lawyer friend of mine said the same thing. Like, no, she's going to get it, or at least it's going to get spent. It could get paid out in other things like appeals or whatnot. But he will not have it. Is the point? Like he will lose that money. Which, that's fun. That is most of his net worth, I'm sure. So that is fun. It's really great to see this happen. It is wonderful to see any sort of, I don't want to see justice because I don't know, that implies there's something being righted. It's not really being righted, but I do like seeing it being named and called out for what it is when we're talking about any sort of sexual assault, any sort of assault at all, but sexual assault in particular. And I think that, E. Jean Carroll is a pretty strong person. Like, that's a lot to go through and to continue to go through. And I'm glad that she has felt supported in such a way that she could continue to do this, because it is not easy at all to be that person. And she has absolutely dug in and really continued to push this. And I mean, I'm very impressed by her.
Yeah. And I just think that this trial is fairly easy for the public to understand. And I feel like everybody, I was calling them a rapist months ago because the judge in the first civil trial said he committed rape, and people are trying to split hairs about it being a civil trial or that wasn't exactly what the charge was. I'm not sure, but it does seem like that's sticking. A lot of mainstream pundits, analysts, and politicians are saying, listen, the guy's a convicted rapist. He's defamed this woman now. She keeps winning in court. It makes it, I'm not going to say it makes it harder for people to make arguments, but I feel like there is perception more out there. The public's like, all right, listen, this guy's bad. He's not a good person. If we weren't clear enough.
I mean, the only problem I have with that is just, I don't think this has won a lot a new people to any side. I don't think anyone's swayed. Yeah. I don't think this was the thing. Well, a New York jury said what?
Right.
No, I don't think anyone's going oh, well, now I think he's bad. No, that's not happening. All of his supporters are still there. They've already, they reckoned with whatever was left of their soul long time ago. And this has no bearing on it whatsoever. And the people who didn't like him, don't like him more. So it's certainly, to me, it does nothing to change any sort of perception of him whatsoever. It is, however, just, I would say, a broader win for anyone who's experienced sexual assault. And I think it's a shame that it takes someone as strong as E. Jean Carroll and as, coming from such a, I don't want to dismiss her in any way, but coming from such a stable and secure place that she is in, to be able to go down this road when most victims don't have that kind of support and safety.
Yeah, one might argue that those 2 women down in Georgia who Rudy Giuliani defamed, because that was the crime that Trump committed against E. Jean Carroll.
Yeah.
In addition to rape, but he was never, but that was a civil conviction. Anyway, those 2 women didn't have the resources that E. Jean Carroll has, but yet it looks like they got some justice too, what with Giuliani. Although you posted about this E. Jean Carroll verdict or award, you said, I know at this point it'll be small consequence globally, but still the joy I'll feel about this is when Trump is being eaten and vomited by burrowing insects. So you can unpack that, please.
Yeah, no, I understand. There's a lot going on there.
You left it all on the field, actually. No, that's fine.
Primary element is I want him dead. God, I want him dead. Yeah. It's so hard. I mean, like, that's just it. And fundamentally, it is actually about my sort of frustration and disappointment because, of course, it doesn't really change anything. And his dying isn't going to, unfortunately, change a lot of things.
No matter how he dies,
I want him dead.
No matter how he dies, there will be a conspiracy of how he died. And it will be your fault, actually, because that's the one I've started.
That's cool. I love that. That's great. Oh, please pin that on me. Oh, that would be the best thing I've ever done in my lifetime.
There's a statue of you.
And I have children who I like. So, like, that's really saying something.
I think a lot changes when he dies.
Do you?
I do.
I mean, I think it depends when he dies, certainly. I mean, if he's going to keep kicking it for 20, 25 years, I think he'll probably have been replaced in that time by, someone even worse, and it really won't matter. If he dies tomorrow, I don't know. Yeah. A lot of that would create a real interesting scenario.
What is this post about over on Blue Sky? You wrote, when I first started doing progressive tax advocacy, I met with someone entrenched in the fight who scoffed and said my goals were unreasonable over any time frame and lectured me to compromise from the gate. It's infuriating how many people there are exactly like that, still holding us back everywhere. That one is really, you can unpack. I want to understand what that's about.
Yeah. That one. No, so I came into progressive political advocacy from a completely naive, maybe not entirely naive, but I didn't do it the way most people do it. Most of DC is made up of individuals who decided, I want to be in politics, and they went to school for politics of one sort or another.
Right.
And then they interned in politics, and then they joined a political campaign, and then they did their time on the Hill, and they staffed, and they really, there's some really clear paths that take you into politics. And I didn't do any of that at all. I mean, I was a political science major, but I didn't do any of the rest of it. I didn't, I had no expectation of ever going this route. And I came to it much later in life after having had careers in nonprofits and doing completely other work. And I came into it fully sort of sideways and, big-eyed and just kind of like, all right, cool. Right. Taxes. Let's do this. This is something. And I was, when I, helped co-found Tax March, and we got Tax March off the ground, and I was talking every day with organizers and activists across the country who were into it. They wanted to talk about economic justice and tax fairness. And they were telling me what they were hearing from the organizations they were part of, from the groups they were part of. I mean, these were people who set up their own little indivisible chapter in, some part of Iowa or whatever. And they're like, all right. And they bring everybody together and they talk through things. And they had a really strong perspective on billionaires and on our tax system. And it was really invigorating to me and educating and wonderful. And so I'm talking to them every day. And then I had this meeting with this individual who was they were sort of the representative of the tax fight in DC, and they'd been working really hard at this for many, many years. And they go in and they're on the Hill and they're talking to electeds, and they're seeing what bills are moving, and they're constantly in that kind of world. And I sat down and had this lunch and thought okay, well, I'm just going to talk about all the stuff I'm seeing and what people want. And I was told, well, that's ridiculous. That's absurd. That's ridiculous. That's not going to happen. That's never going to happen. And it was such a deflating, disheartening meeting. And I understood this person was not a bad person. It's not even a person who doesn't want these things, but they've spent 30 odd years. They've seen, they've been in the fight when it wasn't moving at all, when there was this tremendous belief that we had to compromise on everything. And they have that as their entrenched working, operating, procedure. That's what we have to do. Right. And we have to be happy for any small thing that we can kind of like wrest away from ourselves most of the time. And it was incredibly frustrating. And that was the person who was driving a lot of what organizations were pushing for. And I was, here on this other end being like, burn it all down. Like, no, like I was coming in with big, big swings, and it was, of course, ridiculous of a sort. And no one I was talking to thought, yeah, you're going to walk in the door and we're going to take our tax, our top marginal tax rate back to what it was in 1950 when we had like a 90% top marginal tax rate. No one expected that to be legislation that passed, but they did expect for people to want to like actually push on these things. So to hit a wall on our side, being like, no, you can't even try, was so disheartening. And it, I think, really hinders a lot of the movement, the progressive movement across the board in many issue spaces where there's people who have been doing it for so long that they just feel like this is how it's done. This is how we have to do it. And some of them are great and like go, oh, wow, hey, things are different now. I should pay attention to what, some of these other people are saying. And actually, we don't have to do it that way. That does happen, but more often than not, people just resort to what they know and what they're comfortable with. And what they're comfortable with is stuff that has not served us and is holding us back.
It's probably a lot more true of the public sector, even nonprofits, than it is of the private sector, while still true in a lot of private corporations, media, any industry. I just mentioned media because I worked in it, the idealism versus the old veteran, more pragmatic person that is doing things incrementally and by old ways, but not understanding how systems have changed and how society and culture has changed and how media and how we communicate has changed, and trying to harness that to maybe think about passing or even introducing legislation differently and having different levels of success. Is that how you see it now still?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very much the case, and it's very frustrating, and it's also very helpful to me. What are you laughing at?
I mean, it's like how it's just an understatement how frustrating it is, and working in that space. I haven't done it as in the kind of granularity as a full-time job or part-time job even, but I punch in and out of all different kinds of organizations, and I kind of hear the progress and the lack of it, and nothing worse than like the gun movement, but they do get things done. So I was laughing at you saying it's frustrating because I know it's more than that.
Movement is, oh my goodness. I mean, actually, it's interesting because there's an individual I work with who's fantastic, and he spent a lot of time in gun policy space, and he has come over to the tax world, and he was just like, oh my God, it's like amazing over here because like stuff could happen. Like we're like, you guys are actually moving bills. Like this is incredible. We were at such a, people were working so hard and they're working so they're doing so much, but with the knowledge that success on that side is probably going to look like drops of water right now. It's not going to be a big overhaul. And so, moving into a space where like, no. And I think that is part of the frustration that I'm seeing in the tax world is that like, it's one of those things like, have you ever seen, I don't know if I can like verbalize this visualization, but like, have you ever seen like a clogged pipe? And you see like, you kind of see the internal element of it. And there's all this debris just sort of stopping everything. And there's like the power wash that comes behind it. And you watch as the blockage starts to kind of like, it starts to wiggle. It starts to like, and then suddenly bursts forth.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of videos out there. They're supposed to be satisfying. They're under that satisfying.
They all have that hashtag satisfying.
So go ahead. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. And I feel as though on the tax space, like, we're in that wiggly place. It's like, we're there, like stuff, we have the opportunity and it's been blocked for so long and things are starting to move. Bits and pieces are starting to go out. We have electeds who are taking up the message and, say what you will about Biden. And I understand there's lots of negative to say. And it's certainly not that I would say he's like the ideal person, but he has moved tax legislation, like progressive tax legislation and has pushed for it. And his tax plans have been pretty good.
But I think that that's the point of your, original post. You mentioned this is true of a lot of progressive policy spaces, but I don't know, the way that I see it and paying attention to and interviewing so many people in so many different spaces, a lot of them seem to think that the Biden administration, the Democrats in Congress, certainly when they had the House and Senate, got a tremendous amount done. If you've been following progressive politics as long as you and I have a hard time with people who've been following as long as we have, with the frame that we have, seen it so differently. But maybe you and I do. I don't know. Your perspective is yours, and it's very much in that tax lane for sure. And I see a lot of rainbows anyway. So that's my always.
I think there have been. I think that part of the frustration. Well, I think there's sort of multiple places that frustrations are coming from. But one is that feeling like, wait, there's an opportunity here, and you're not taking full advantage of it. And I think that's very fair. And I think that it is fair to be very frustrated and to criticize the way that a lot of the deals have gone down. I mean, obviously, we've had a lot of obstruction, but we've faced these types of obstructions before, especially the obstruction on our own side when we're looking at a mansion and cinema and all of that. And we've managed around it. There's tricks you can play, that it felt like we're not being fully employed, that these people were not getting the full pressure that they needed to. And, whether it be carrot or stick, but it did it did feel like maybe people weren't trying hard enough, and, maybe they were, and we just weren't seeing it, but it's hard to believe that's true. It's hard to take that at faith. So I think there's that frustration. I also think there is a little frustration for individuals who, and I in no way mean this in any sort of derogatory way. In a lot of ways, I'm talking about myself, but there is a large swath of people who, because of age, because of life, because of whatever, weren't paying very close attention for a very long time. And I think the 2016 election really shook a lot of people into watching. And what has happened since 2016 has been actually a lot of things very, very quickly, and probably a lot quicker than I think some of these lanes have moved before. And so because you've seen things move quick, there's this sense of therefore we can move things quickly. And there's frustration when they don't move quick. But I think that's a little bit, sometimes that's a little just an expectation that's maybe a little bit more than what we should have, which is tricky, because I certainly don't want to tell anyone don't push so hard.
Right. It's a hard language.
That's not what I'm saying.
No, it's a hard language to speak to anybody who's doing the work, because you can't talk about what progress is. We don't all measure it the same way. What increments? Well, there's no language to say what is necessarily successful or what is not, without using. Often people just, I think, fall back on kind of absolutes. We have to get everything we want, obviously. But when it comes to the tax issue, it's just for years. I mean, I don't know how big a deal this is. I've heard it's always been a big deal. They take an oath not to raise taxes. Republicans do. Yeah, absolutely. Grover Norquist. Yeah. At the state level, much less in Congress, the U.S. Congress. And so it's just been so hard as a result of the ability that he has and other organizations and activists in his world to pressure them. And it's just such an easy promise to make. And then you see states like Kansas and so many others, just crumbling as a result, obviously, and you could argue, you better than anybody can argue at different parts of our federal government, obviously. So, I mean, it's still a very hard thing to get anything done because it's unpopular and it's hard to talk about to some extent. Yet, it's also the most populous thing in the world to another extent.
It's also very hard because it's difficult to communicate what the clear through lines are. And so because it gets wrapped up in the economy, right? What's the economy? Right. When is the economy doing well? And our economic indicators are just completely nonsense, especially anyone who's telling you, stock market, or at this point, I mean, employment is an indicator, but it's not the same indicator that people use it for. It's not as though employment is just a really straightforward, simple one of, if we have this much employment, that's good. No. What kind of employment do we have? Is our employment fair across the board? Because our system has operated with a skewed idea of how much Black unemployment we would accept. And it was higher than white unemployment. There were racist underpinnings to even the employment indexes. So, I mean, like, we can't just kind of take these things at the word of like, I don't know, employment's doing well. Like, what does that mean? What are people getting paid? How many jobs are people working? What is the sense of security? Are people able to afford to live?
Insurance, health insurance.
Yeah, there's so many other indicators. And yet we fall back on these really, really outdated models of that sort of are meant to tell us how well things are going. And I think that frustrates people because they get told things are doing well when they know they're not. Like, when they look at their own life and go, well, I'm not doing well. My friends aren't doing well. So what are you telling me it's doing well? You lose all trust in any of those types of things. You recognize very quickly, they're obviously not talking about me. They're obviously not doing anything for me. They obviously do not care about me. And you start to fully lose people. And that's, I think, been a real big problem.
There's two places that we were seeing this week where there's a real lack of compassion or care about other human beings. Of course, everything around the border and the fight between the Texas state government and the federal government and the Supreme Court. And this other thing that you were posting about, a lot of people I see in progressive circles, and I think everybody'd be outraged if they heard it, but Republican governors in 15 states are turning down food money for 8 million children. States with some of the highest rates of children living in poverty are rejecting bipartisan aid. They're turning the money down because, of course, they argued they don't want people to be dependent on these types of, quote, handouts or whatever they call them. And I believe that's the beginning and end of their argument. And when a lot of us see that, we see something so horrific and brutally cruel and nakedly political that it's hard to stomach and talk about. But I still want you to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of hatred at the root of so many political policies. And the hatred is very helpful because if you can hate others, you can say, well, it's because they're less and I'm better. And it feels good to be better. It feels good to say, well, I guess I've just figured things out. I guess I don't hate them. I don't savvy.
No, but I don't.
No. I understand. I mean, I hate the governors, but I mean, like when your policy is driven.
No. I was going to play the right wing.
Okay.
I don't hate anybody. You're wrong to say that I hate anybody. I care about them, which is why I don't want them to be dependent on these government handouts.
Yeah, I recognize the sort of lies we tell ourselves, of course. I mean, like, do you want me to actually argue you in that place? Because I wouldn't have started where I started if I thought that's what I was going to do. But
yeah, you have to defend. Don't tell me I hate these children that aren't being fed. I hate these children being dependent on this tax money. And by the way, it's tax money that I'm working for. I'm paying to feed these poor kids. Why don't their parents work harder and stuff?
Yeah,
I don't have all the arguments, and it's hard to make them.
I know
out of my mouth, but
no, and it's hard to like. It is a completely different conversation. If I'm in a conversation with somebody who has that, fundamental mindset, I'm not talking politics with them. I'm not starting at politics with them. I'm starting at like humanity with them. Like we're like, hey, let's talk about what it means to be human. Like, let's start there. Hey, buddy. Hey, how you feeling? If you fall down and there are a lot of people around, do you ever think, gosh, it would, I've hurt myself. It would be nice if one of these people would help me up, or even not wonder that. But if someone does stop and help you out, do you think, wow, that's a nice person. That was so nice of them to stop on their day and help me up. Or do you think, ha, sucker, you fucking idiot. You just took 30 seconds out of your day to help me who you don't even fucking know. You're a loser. Do you like mock them to their face as they're helping you up?
I have, but that's only people on scooters.
No, because that is sort of like a fundamental underpinning is there is this sort of belief that they are a sucker for helping anyone or for doing anything, as opposed to like, trying to look into what is actually happening here. Why are so many people struggling? Why do so many kids need help? I think that there is fundamentally, it's a lot easier to say, well, they need help because their parents are lazy and I'm not lazy, so I'm better than them. And if they were just better people, then they wouldn't need that sort of help. So they should just, hold themselves up. That's
the idea
easier.
That poor people are lazy is the most pernicious lie ever told to humanity, based on anecdotes and people's personal experiences of things they see. Of course, the poor people are almost always working the hardest. They're the hardest, most motivated work, trying to climb out of poverty. Most of the time, opportunity is limited, and sometimes they're stuck there for generations. But the idea that they're lazy, I just always have to give that rant. It's who's only, and then, of course, I was poor and I worked my way out of it. You can too.
Right. No, I mean, there is this, again, though, I do think that fundamentally what it falls back to is that people really want to feel, one, they want to feel better about themselves than other people, sure. But they also it's like easier if you think that people are lazy. Your whole worldview is more simple and straightforward. And you don't have to it's a real clear path. And that is, people do tend to gravitate to what they can comprehend, which isn't me calling everyone who is on the right stupid. But I would say that the vast majority of them rely on not having to exercise intellect in these ways. They don't have to exercise parts of their brain. And they do it often in places where it's just not challenged. Until it gets perpetuated in these echo chambers on the radio, for sure. I mean, that can happen in any ideological because
space,
then you end up going well, why is this so vast? What's happening here? Is it really that there's so many people are lazy? And that's where you wind up with basically racial stereotypes, or you wind up in holding these really weird beliefs that the, individuals from the at our southern border are trying to come in because they both want to take our jobs and they want to bleed us dry by leeching off of our social system. They want to take our jobs by not working. How is that? Right. You end up in that place where you have to hold both those ideas concurrently and believe them both to be true, depending on what you're voicing. And these are people who do that without ever feeling any need or social pressure to pause and say, hey, wait a second. That doesn't make sense. These two things don't make sense. How would that work? But we've allowed societally for people to just kind of not have to challenge that, which is, it sucks. It just sucks. It really does. I mean, I would love to be able to bring back a little bit of shame in general. And in general, how our values have changed in so many ways. It's really interesting. It is interesting because we had so much shame as a society, and we used it for so many of the wrong things, right? You feel shamed about how you look, or you have to feel shamed about, what clothes you wear or something like that. We pointed at all these terrible things, and then we went, oh, you know what? That's not great. People shouldn't feel ashamed for being a redhead. I don't know, whatever, they shouldn't feel ashamed because they can't afford the best clothes or whatever. Let's change things. But it didn't change those things. Those things are still there. It just removed it for the worst people who went, I should feel ashamed at my ignorance. Now, shame's bad. Not going to do that anymore. Getting rid of it. And they've successfully gotten rid of it in a lot of ways, in a lot of spaces, and it's wild to watch. We're back in the fight here at my local school board. This time it's over transgender people. I'll tell you what. One thing I found that's been pretty disappointing is that the progressive movement, who was out to fight for DEI and against the myths about CRT and all that last year. 2 years ago, they're not as vociferous. There's a lot of support for LGB. But the T support is scaring a lot of liberals. They're not dying. I'm dying on Trans Hill, by the way, in my town. I just got to say, I'm the real victim
Because I mean, like, advocating for trans people is to be fair, it is to be called a pedophile. You are a groomer and a pedophile.
Interesting.
And so, most people don't like that. They actually don't want to be called that. And people are outspoken about how, your boy is not a girl. You're like, they're just really cruel right now.
I love flipping that one right around, though. Like, I really, whenever I can, and I know it's very hard actually, because that is a really, it hurts. I mean, it hurts, especially if you're.
Well, just so you know, just the context, a woman came on and posted on Facebook on our school's Facebook page this unbelievable post about her child who's a trans girl, and it was really beautiful. It was really well written, and then they immediately are like, she's not a girl.
Jeez.
And it was so heart-wrenching to see, and it's over and over, and she was above it all, but it was, sorry, I interrupted you, but I just wanted to tell you that's what they were doing.
No, I mean, I definitely, anyone who, basically like all the anti-trans people, I like, I don't totally flip it around and call them pedophiles, but I do like to be like, why are you so obsessed with children's genitals? Why are you so obsessed? Like, I like to put that flashlight or spotlight.
A lot of it is they are worried that you are going to make their kid gay or trans. They say it openly. Don't stop teaching my kid to be this way. Stop teaching my child that it's okay, accepted, and that anybody can be whatever they want. You could be a boy, a girl, a cat. Stop teaching that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, it's terrifying to them.
They're not teaching that, by the way. They don't teach it. They have conversations about people's identities.
You're talking about the teachers in the school?
They're saying it's part of curriculum, sure, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They're also teaching anal sex in 8th grade. What they're teaching is sex ed, and they cover anal sex, which they did when we were younger in New York State. Of course they did. And the parents are outraged that they're teaching the same thing they taught them because they don't remember it. And they're phrasing it as they're teaching the kids to have anal sex. And I'm over here going, if only. A lot less pregnancy, which, by the way, teen pregnancy
you just went
way down
there. Yeah.
Teen pregnancy way down from when we were younger, by the way. Like, it's all working, those policies, when you teach kids, especially now when they're learning about it, not only on the school bus and from their older siblings, but as much as they want in their bedroom, on their phone, on their computer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now you're teaching anal sex. What?
Well, people need to be angry and outraged about something, that's really important. What else are they going to do? They're very bored.
You taught anal sex in that workshop that you did, that one internship.
I legitimately don't know if you're trying to make a joke or you're actually accurately talking about my past. Because yes, I did. Absolutely, I did.
Oh, wait, you did? Wait a second. No, I know that you did do. What was it that you did? I was joking. But I remember you.
I was like, I think you're joking, but you might actually just be recalling my life. Yeah. I've had every job you can have. I've always been the sort of person who's just like, all right, what's that pays? Sure. Yeah. Okay. I'll do it.
That pays.
I mean, because I've always been in a place where I did not necessarily feel fully secure. And so in college, I just took every sort of every kind of job I could that was that didn't have regular hours so that I could go to classes. And I worked for a women's clinic near my college. And one of the things that they had me do was they trained me so that I could go out and do basically sex ed presentations.
Outreach and education for who?
Yeah. I did it to a bunch of groups, but they sent me out a couple of times to sororities, and I would go talk to sororities about sexual education. And I had we'd bring condoms and flavored condoms. And that was the first time I ever encountered a pocket pussy, which was fascinating. It was kind of neat, actually. It was how when you're.
Yeah, yes, I know. I actually made one. It was rudimentary, but.
Okay. All right. So you get it. Anyway. So I would go to these sororities, and those ones in particular, I definitely had 18-year-old. I mean, I was not older than them. I was a year or two older, but I'd been trained and stuff. But tentatively asking things can you get pregnant from anal sex and things like that? It's
so important. It's so valuable. I would call my older brother and ask him some of the most ignorant questions about sex because I just didn't have a lot of experience even when I was 19 and AIDS was a big thing, and I was people were worried, but That's great that you did that, and it's funny that my joke led us into that. But the truth is, you've also outed yourself as like the queen of all groomers. You groomed those sorority girls, even though you were around their age. That you technically are a groomer.
Yes,
they use that word.
I know,
instead of indoctrination now, and it's such a violent word. It's such an effective word because it's so gross because it implies touching. And implies actual physical touch, and it's way worse than brainwashing. And you're indoctrinating, brainwashing our kids with your bullshit. Now you're grooming our kids. That used to be a word that was reserved for actual pedophilia and sexual kind of assault and predatory behavior. But now it's just anybody who they disagree with is a groomer.
Yeah, of course, pedophile groomer. I mean, they've figured out exactly what people want to avoid being called, and then they use those so that they can effectively like take over conversations and make, again, rule by fear, right? Like, well, I don't want to be called that, so I'm just going to say nothing because I don't want to get involved. That's, it works really well. And we have to completely numb ourselves to it. And we also have to I do think this is an area where like comedy actually becomes quite helpful, because the more you can kind of mimic that stuff away and like mock it into dust, you absolutely are able to completely obliterate the strength and power of these types of words.
Always been very effective at that. You've always been very effective at that. I've tried to be very effective at that. What is your reaction to Jon Stewart coming back? Do you think he'll save the world?
I think it's a little too late for that. I mean, I like Jon Stewart. I think, I don't think Jon Stewart was ever the savior we thought he was at the time, right? But we didn't have a lot to go by. We didn't have a lot to compare him to at that time. And he's obviously a very smart person, and he obviously cares quite a lot. Does that mean he's the big progressive hero? I don't think so. But I do respect him, and I'm if that's what he wants to do, great. But I do worry when I see people pinning a lot of hope to him.
He literally was my savior. He hired me, and then Colbert hired me.
Never mind. He is
without him. For me, he was my savior.
I see. So he's who we have to blame. I'm going to pick at it now.
You son of a bitch, Maura. Thank you so much. You're hilarious and brilliant and awesome, and can go anywhere and do anything and always be great. Thank you very much for doing this today, as always.
Thanks, Pete.
Yeah, isn't she always great? That's Maura Quint, everybody. Go follow her on all the social medias, links in the show notes. Come to join us in Vegas, March 22nd and 23rd. Subscribe to this podcast, patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Now, pay more anytime you want. Thanks for being a part of our community. Go write a rating and review and all the rest. Love you guys. Talk to you later tomorrow. Look for my conversation with Joanne Carducci, and I've reached out to Ellie Mistal, who is also portrayed on SNL. So I'm talking over Jon Carroll. How dare I? Love you guys. Love you, bumblebees.
When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels been leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. You got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a love and causes for loss, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it than now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run there.